Let me hit you with something uncomfortable. The fastest way to lose power in your life is to explain yourself to people who didn't earn the explanation. Every time you tell people what you're doing, you're not being open. You're bleeding leverage. Because the moment your plans leave your mouth, they stop being yours. They become targets, opinions, comparisons, and silent sabotage you'll never see coming. If this is hitting harder than you expected, pause for a second. Like this, subscribe or save it, not for motivation, but as a reminder the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself. When you understand that information is leverage, you stop treating your words casually and start treating them like assets. Every detail you reveal about what you do, what you're planning, or where you're heading gives other people something they didn't earn. Once that information leaves you, you no longer control how it's interpreted, repeated, distorted, or used against you. People filter what you say through their own insecurities, ambitions, fears, and agendas, and that means the story that comes back to you is never the one you told. Some will downplay it to protect their ego, some will question it to feel superior, some will quietly compete, and some will plant doubt where there was none before. None of that requires bad intentions. It's simply how human psychology works. The danger is subtle because it doesn't look like sabotage. It looks like advice, curiosity, jokes, or concern. But each reaction chips away at clarity and momentum. When you explain what you do, you invite opinions, and opinions create friction. Friction slows execution. Silence, on the other hand, keeps leverage in your hands. It allows you to move without interference, without defending your choices, and without adjusting your direction to satisfy external reactions. People assume that transparency builds trust, but premature transparency actually weakens position. In negotiation, in social dynamics, and in personal growth, the person who knows less about you is forced to respond to outcomes rather than intentions. Outcomes are solid, intentions are debatable. This is why powerful individuals often appear vague. It's not arrogance, it's containment. By saying less, you avoid being boxed into an identity that no longer fits you later. You avoid being pressured to live up to a version of yourself you mentioned too early. You preserve flexibility. Most importantly, you protect your internal confidence. The moment you start explaining yourself, you unconsciously start seeking agreement, and seeking agreement is the first step toward self-doubt. When you keep your plans private, your energy stays focused forward instead of sideways. You don't need permission, reassurance, or applause to continue. You act, you adapt, you execute, and people only see the result, not the fragile process that led there, not the uncertainty, not the unfinished edges, only the finished reality standing in front of them. Most people don't listen to understand or support you, and once you accept that, your behavior changes permanently. When you talk about what you do, their mind is not focused on your growth, your struggle, or your vision. It is scanning for comparison. Am I ahead or behind? Am I smarter or weaker? Does this threaten my position or validate it? This happens instantly and subconsciously. Even people who care about you are not immune to this instinct because the human brain is wired to rank itself socially. That ranking then dictates how they respond to you. If your progress makes them feel inferior, they will minimize it. If it makes them feel superior, they will patronize you. If it puts you on the same level, they may quietly compete. None of this is announced out loud, but it shows up in subtle behaviors, tone shifts, backhanded advice, delayed support, or selective encouragement. This is why sharing plans often feels draining instead of empowering. You walk away confused, slightly deflated, or second-guessing yourself without being able to explain why. It's because you unknowingly entered a comparison arena. The moment comparison begins, your journey stops being about execution and starts being about perception. You start editing your goals so they sound reasonable, acceptable, or impressive enough. That is a dangerous shift. Progress requires irrational commitment, not social approval. When people listen through the lens of judgment or competition, they introduce noise into your thinking. Their questions aren't designed to help you win. They're designed to help them feel stable, and stability for them often means limiting you. Silence removes that entire dynamic. When people don't know what you're doing, they can't measure themselves against you. And without measurement, competition fades. Judgment loses its trigger. You regain psychological freedom. You no longer feel the need to justify timelines, explain pivots, or defend ambition. You stop carrying invisible social weight. This is why quiet builders outperform loud talkers over time. They aren't smarter or more talented. They are simply unburdened by other people's internal scorekeeping. Their energy stays clean. Their focus stays intact. They don't have to win conversations before they win results. They let action unfold privately, untouched by comparison, untouched by judgment, untouched by the silent competitions happening in other people's heads. Silence creates ambiguity, and ambiguity unsettles people in a way that gives you an advantage without you ever having to assert it. When someone fully understands what you do, where you stand, and what you're planning, they relax because they know how to categorize you. The human mind craves labels because labels make the world feel controllable. The moment you fit neatly into a box, people know how to talk to you, how to treat you, and how much respect or disregard to assign you. Ambiguity disrupts that comfort. When you say less, people are forced to guess, and guessing makes them cautious. Caution slows judgment, weakens manipulation, and prevents premature conclusions about your value. This is why silence often feels like confidence even when no words are spoken. You are not explaining, defending, or proving anything, and that absence of explanation signals that you don't need external validation to exist comfortably in your position. Ambiguity also protects you from being psychologically maneuvered. When people know your exact role, ambitions, or limitations, they can tailor their behavior to influence you, flatter you, pressure you, or exploit you. When they don't, they have less to work with. They don't know which buttons to press, which insecurities to target, or which incentives will sway you. That uncertainty gives you room to observe rather than react. You can watch how people behave without feeding them information that would shape their strategy toward you. Silence turns interactions into data gathering instead of self-exposure. It also enhances perceived authority. Leaders and high-status individuals are rarely the most talkative in the room. They speak selectively, and that selectivity makes every word carry weight. When you're ambiguous, people project significance onto you because the mind fills gaps with assumptions. Most of the time, those assumptions are more powerful than anything you could have said directly. Ambiguity keeps you adaptable. You can shift direction, upgrade goals, or change strategy without having to explain why you contradicted your earlier words. You are not trapped by your past statements. You are free to evolve quietly. Silence, in this way, is not passivity. It is strategic restraint. It allows you to move through environments without being pinned down, underestimated, or prematurely evaluated, while maintaining control over how and when your true capabilities are revealed. When you tell people your plans too early, you invite interference that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with psychology. A plan is fragile before it becomes reality. It exists mostly as intention, energy, and belief. And exposing it at that stage subjects it to forces it is not yet strong enough to withstand. People hear your plans and immediately interact with them as if they are fully formed, but they are not. Questions turn into doubt. Doubt turns into hesitation. Hesitation turns into delay. Even supportive reactions can be damaging because advice given without full context often redirects you towards safer, smaller versions of what you originally intended. This is how ambition gets slowly negotiated downward without you noticing. Interference doesn't always look like opposition. It often looks like concern, realism, or just trying to help. Someone suggests an easier path, a more practical timeline, or a less risky option, and suddenly your internal compass starts wobbling. You begin to adjust your vision to accommodate other people's comfort levels. That adjustment feels reasonable in the moment, but over time, it erodes commitment. There is also the emotional interference that comes from accountability before execution. When people know your plans, you feel watched. That pressure shifts your focus from building to performing. You start thinking about how progress will look rather than whether it's real. You may rush steps to appear consistent or abandon the plan entirely to avoid future embarrassment. Silence removes this invisible audience. Without spectators, you can experiment, fail, pivot, and rebuild without psychological cost. Another form of interference comes from envy and competition. The moment people know what you're aiming for, some will unconsciously try to match, block, or outpace you, especially in shared environments. Opportunities become crowded. Information stops flowing freely. Cooperation quietly fades. None of this happens when your plans remain private. You move through the process unnoticed, unchallenged, and uninterrupted. By keeping your plans to yourself, you give them time to mature. You allow skill, structure, and evidence to replace raw intention. When you finally reveal what you're doing, it's no longer a plan that can be interfered with. It's a reality that must be acknowledged. Silence protects the incubation phase, where real progress is made and where most goals either survive or die unnoticed. Seeking validation feels harmless, but it quietly undermines your ability to execute with force and clarity. The moment you tell people what you're doing in hopes of encouragement, approval, or reassurance, you shift the source of confidence from inside to outside. That shift is subtle, but it's dangerous. Instead of acting because you are certain, you begin acting because you want to be affirmed. Your brain starts monitoring reactions, tone, and feedback, and that constant monitoring fractures focus. Execution requires tunnel vision, not social awareness. When validation becomes part of the process, doubt automatically follows, because validation is inconsistent by nature. Some people will react positively, some will be indifferent, and some will be skeptical. Each response pulls you in a different emotional direction, forcing you to recalibrate your belief repeatedly. Over time, this creates hesitation. You pause before taking steps, wondering how they'll be perceived. You delay decisions until you can explain them convincingly. You soften bold moves so they sound reasonable. None of this improves results, but all of it feels productive because it masquerades as reflection. Validation also creates dependency. Once you get used to external encouragement, its absence feels like a warning signal. Silence from others starts to feel like disapproval, even when it means nothing. That perceived disapproval drains momentum. You start questioning paths you were once confident about, not because the plan is flawed, but because no one is clapping yet. This is why many people stall after announcing goals. They receive an initial burst of approval, a hit of dopamine, and then nothing. Without ongoing reinforcement, motivation drops and execution fades. Silence protects you from that cycle. When no one knows what you're doing, there is no one to impress, reassure, or convince. Progress becomes the only feedback loop. You act, you observe results, you adjust, and you continue. Doubt has less room to grow because it isn't being fed by conflicting opinions. Your confidence becomes grounded in action rather than reaction. You no longer need permission to continue, nor comfort when things get uncomfortable. The work itself becomes the anchor. This internalized confidence is quieter but far more stable. It doesn't spike with praise or collapse with criticism. It allows you to move decisively, even when outcomes are uncertain, because your identity is no longer tied to being approved, only to being effective. People don't interact with who you truly are or who you are becoming. They interact with the mental box they place you in, and that box is built almost entirely from what you tell them. The moment you explain what you do, you give others a label to attach to you, and once that label exists, it becomes a ceiling. They start predicting your limits, your competence, your value, and even your future based on incomplete information. From that point forward, every action you take is filtered through their expectations. If you exceed the box, they feel threatened or confused. If you stay within it, they feel validated. Either way, their treatment of you is no longer neutral. This is why people who talk too much about themselves often feel underestimated or misunderstood. They unknowingly trained others to see them in a narrow way, and once that perception is formed, it is extremely resistant to change. Humans prefer consistency over accuracy. It feels safer to keep seeing you as the person they already defined than to update their model of you. When you stay private, that box never fully forms. People don't know how capable you are. how far you're willing to go, or how much you've already done. That uncertainty keeps doors open. It allows you to step into opportunities without being prejudged or limited by past explanations. It also prevents premature familiarity. When people think they understand you, they unconsciously lower their respect. Mystery sustains attention and authority. Another hidden danger of being boxed is that you begin to live up to it, without realizing it. When others treat you according to a label, you subtly adjust to match it. You avoid behaviors that contradict it to prevent friction. You downplay strengths that don't fit the narrative. Over time, your identity becomes shaped by external expectations instead of internal intent. Silence interrupts that process. Without a clear label imposed on you, you remain flexible. You can grow, pivot, and expand without having to fight old assumptions. You can show up differently in different environments without being accused of inconsistency. People respond to what you do in the moment, not what they think you are. This gives you strategic freedom. You are not performing a role, you are creating outcomes. And when results finally force people to update their perception, the shift is dramatic. You're no longer asking to be seen differently. You are being seen differently because reality left them no alternative. Results command respect in ways words never can, and explanations rarely do. When you tell people what you're doing, you are essentially negotiating for their approval before anything tangible exists, and that negotiation rarely ends in your favor. People are quick to judge, slow to trust, and often distracted by their own agendas. They will dissect your intentions, second-guess your methods, and undervalue your efforts long before any outcome appears. Words are cheap, but results are undeniable. The moment you deliver, the narrative shifts. What once was speculation becomes reality, and reality doesn't require interpretation. It enforces acknowledgement. This is why the most powerful people in history rarely explained their vision in detail. They acted, they produced, and the results spoke louder than any justification ever could. Silence preserves this advantage. When people don't know your intentions, they can't preemptively resist, compete with, or criticize your moves. Every success becomes amplified because it appears autonomous, inevitable, and impressive. They see the outcome without the context, and that lack of context makes the achievement seem larger, more mysterious, and more authoritative. Results also build internal credibility. When you focus on execution rather than explanation, you cultivate discipline, resilience, and confidence that aren't dependent on external validation. This internalized authority compounds. Each successful action reduces the need to explain, justify, or negotiate in the future, because your history of results speaks for itself. Explanations, in contrast, often invite debate. They give people a chance to intervene, advise, or undermine, even unintentionally, before you have established anything concrete. Results close that door. They remove the argument. They eliminate doubt. They transform observers into witnesses and skeptics into believers. Over time, those who consistently act without oversharing accumulate a kind of silent influence. People begin to defer, respect, or follow them, not because they demanded it, not because they persuaded with rhetoric, but because outcomes have proven competence repeatedly. This is the power of letting results speak. When your work, your accomplishments, and your consistency carry the weight, words become optional, influence becomes effortless, and your position in any social, professional, or personal arena becomes unassailable without you ever having to justify a single move. Strategic privacy is not about hiding. It's about protecting your energy, focus, and influence so you can operate at full capacity without unnecessary friction. Every time you reveal what you do, you are exposing a part of yourself that others can react to, analyze, or manipulate, and those reactions almost always cost more than you realize. People will offer advice, critique your methods, or compare their path to yours, often unconsciously steering you away from your true trajectory. Even well-intentioned input can become interference because it subtly shifts your attention from execution to explanation, from momentum to justification. By keeping your work private, you maintain control over the narrative. You decide when and how your efforts are revealed, and you prevent premature opinions from shaping the path you are carving. Privacy also shields you from social pressure, which is one of the most underestimated forms of sabotage. When people know your intentions, they unconsciously try to influence your choices, whether by discouraging risk, questioning your timing, or subtly nudging you toward decisions that make them comfortable. Silence removes that vector. It allows you to experiment, adapt, and iterate without constantly defending or rationalizing your choices. Strategic privacy also